Dumb Husky and His White Cat Shizun is a BL novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer: descriptive violence and triggers for sensitive content. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 34. This venerable one falls out of favor. Only Chu Wanning could say such a shocking sentence calmly. When the three disciples heard it, they all had different feelings in their hearts. Xuemeng's thoughts were the simplest. There was only one exclamation, ah. Amoranfu was a little more complicated. He recalled some things from his past life and pinched his chin as he pondered. He thought to himself that he would never want to see Chu Wanning's third weapon again in his life. As for Shimei, he tilted his head. His pair of Jiangnan's misty apricot eyes flashed with a faint glow. It was as if he was worshipping, but also as if he was looking forward to it. Did Tianwen get it from Jin Changqi? Chu Wanning replied, yes. Then the other two? Chu Wanning replied, one is, one isn't. The temperament of the weapon is usually not too strong and can be controlled. You don't have to worry too much. Xuemeng sighed enviously, I really want to see Shizun's other two Jinmu weapons. Chu Wanning replied, Tianwen should be able to deal with most of the time. As for the other two, I would rather they never have a chance to use their skills. Xuemeng reluctantly grunted, but his eyes were still glowing. Chu Wanning saw it and knew that it was hard to suppress his passion for martial arts. Fortunately, Xuemeng's heart was not bad. With a little guidance, he did not have to worry too much. Amo Ran, on the other hand, was rubbing his chin with a smile that was not a smile. He knew that a soldier was a weapon of death, and the sage had no choice but to use it. Chu Wanning. Regardless of whether it was his past or present life, he had lost because of his righteousness. It was written in books that evil could not prevail over good, but this idiot had to take it seriously. He deserved to be so gifted and powerful, yet he still became a prisoner and became a bone in the grave. Shizun. Shimei's voice interrupted Emoran's reverie. Disciple heard that every year, hundreds and thousands of people come to the Rising Sun Peak to seek martial arts, but only one or two people have the opportunity to open the golden pool. In fact, it has been several years since the pool was frozen. Disciples' cultivation is shallow. It's really impossible for me to meet a good fate. The Azan and young master are both outstanding talents in the human world. Why don't I not go? I'll stay here and practice more basic spells. He did not speak. His porcelain-like face was shrouded in a faint mist, as if he was deep in thought. In his past life, Shimei had given up the opportunity to go to the Rising Sun Peak because of his inferiority complex. Seeing this, Amoran immediately smiled and said, I'm just going to give it a try. If it doesn't work, then just treat it as a trip. Why are you staying at the peak of life and death all day long? You should go out and experience the world. Shimei became more and more nervous. No, my cultivation is too weak. There are so many people in the Rising Sun Peak. If I meet a disciple from another sect and want to spar with him, I'm sure I can't win. I'll only embarrass Shizun. Chu Wanning raised his eyes and said, are you afraid of this? His question was very strange. It sounded like a question, but it also sounded like a rhetorical question. The other two did not feel anything, but Shimei felt a chill in his heart. He raised his eyes and met Chu Wanning's cold and sharp gaze. Shizun. Chu Wanning's expression did not change as he said, you're a healer, so you're not good at fighting with others. If someone pesters you, just reject them. It's not shameful. Amoran also grinned. Don't be afraid, Shime. I'm here. Thus, they packed up and set off on their way. This time, they were going to the upper cultivation realm. It was a long journey, and riding a horse was too tiring. Chu Wanning still did not want to fly on the art of sword flight. Thus, the carriage and horses traveled at a leisurely pace for more than 10 days before they finally arrived at a town next to Dawn Reflection Peak. The 3 disciples had already come out of the carriage. Only Chu Wanning was too lazy to move. He lifted the bamboo curtain of the carriage and said, "Let's rest here for a night. Tomorrow, we'll reach Dawn Reflection Peak after a short walk." The city they were resting in was called Dai City. Although the city was not big, it was very rich and prosperous. The women wore silk garments and the men wore embroidered hats and silk robes. It was even more luxurious than the wealthiest place in the lower cultivation realm. Shuemeng sneered, "Those dogs in the upper cultivation realm are really stinking of wine and meat, and freezing to death on the road." Amoran did not like it either. It was rare that he did not refute Shuemeng. Instead, he smiled sweetly and ridiculed the scene in front of him. "Yes, I'm very jealous of you. No wonder so many people want to move to the upper cultivation realm. Even if you don't cultivate, being an ordinary person is much better than living in the lower cultivation realm." Chu Wanning took out a silver gray mask and put it on his face. Only then did he slowly get off the carriage. He looked around at the bustling city, but no one knew what he was thinking. Shuemeng asked curiously, "Why does Shizun need to wear a mask?" Chu Wanning answered, "This is the territory of Linyi's scholarly wind sect. It's not convenient for me to show myself." Seeing that Shuemeng was still confused, Amoran sighed and said, "Little Phoenix doesn't have any brains. Shizun used to be a guest elder of Linyi's scholarly wind sect." Hearing his words, Shuemeng remembered, but the Heavens Chosen was unwilling to admit that he had forgotten this point. His face flushed red, he rolled his eyes and said, "Of course, I know that. I'm just curious. He's just a guest elder, he didn't sell him to them, he can leave whenever he wants. Could it be that the scholarly wind sect's people see Shizun and kidnap him back?" Amoran said, "You're really stupid. Haven't you heard? Ever since Shizun left the scholarly wind sect, very few people in the upper cultivation world know of his whereabouts. When we went down the mountain to eliminate demons, if someone asked about our sect, we would only say that we were at the pinnacle of life and death, but we wouldn't mention who our master was, right?" Shuemeng was stunned for a moment before he finally realized what was going on and said, "So Shizun's whereabouts are a mystery in the upper cultivation world? But Shizun is so powerful, why would he hide his whereabouts?" "I didn't hide it on purpose, but I didn't want anyone to disturb us," Chu Wanning said. "Let's go, let's stay in the inn." "Hey, the 4 immortal lords want to stay in the inn." The waiter of the inn ran over with a face full of oil. Shuemeng said, "I want 4 rooms." The waiter rubbed his hands and smiled, "I'm really sorry, immortal lords. Well, recently, the guest rooms in Dai City have been a little tight, and we can't spare 4 rooms. Why don't we have to force the immortal lords to live together? How about 2 rooms?" There was no other way, and they could only make do with it. It was just that there was a small problem during the allocation of rooms. "I want to share a room with Shime," Amoran said forcefully while Chu Wanning was paying the bill and his 3 disciples were gathered together. Shuemeng couldn't take it anymore. "Why?" Amoran asked curiously, "Don't you like to stick to Shizun?" Then, Then I don't want to. He respected Chu Wanning a lot, but the word reverence couldn't be less than the word fear. He couldn't tell whether he liked Chu Wanning more or feared him more. Seeing Xuemeng's face turning red, Amoran smiled cheekily and said, "Little brother, it's not that you don't want to sleep with Shizun, it's that you don't dare, right?" Xuemeng's eyes widened. "Shizun doesn't eat people, why wouldn't I dare?" "Oh," Amoran laughed. "But Shizun likes to hit people in his dreams, do you know that?" His face turning green and white, Xuemeng suddenly thought of something and angrily asked, "How do you know about Shizun when he's asleep? Have you slept with him before?" These words were somewhat ambiguous. Although Xuemeng himself didn't have any evil intentions, the speaker didn't mean it and the listener didn't mean it. Amoran thought to himself, "Not only did I sleep with him, I even make out with him in my previous life." But the hero didn't mention his past bravery. He still smiled and said, "If you don't believe me, you can have a taste tonight. Remember to bring a bottle of metal wound medicine, if there's any injury, it can be used to save you." Xuemeng was about to explode, but Chu Wanning had already paid the bill and walked over. He glanced at them indifferently and said, "Let's go." The three youths followed Shizun up the stairs like little tails. When they stood in front of the guest room, the three youths, who had been arguing merrily, began to stare intently, waiting for Chu Wanning to speak. In fact, their argument just now was all for naught. When they were really waiting for the rooms to be arranged, they all shut their mouths and waited for Shizun to speak. Chu Wanning paused and said, "There are only 2 rooms left. Who among you?" He hesitated inwardly and felt somewhat embarrassed. How should he put it? "Who wants to come with me?" His words sounded a bit pitiful and cautious, which really didn't seem like Elder Yu Heng's style. Then what should he say? "Moeu, come with me." Like this? Forget it. Paired with a mace and a piece of tiger skin, he was no different from the Black Wind Stockade stronghold master who robbed a good young woman. After all, he was a grand master of his generation, so he still had to keep his face. Moreover, ever since they had fallen asleep in the Red Lotus Pavilion, the two of them had felt awkward and rarely spent time alone. Chu Wanning's expression was indifferent and calm, but countless thoughts were running through his mind. After a long time, he finally raised his chin slightly and nodded at Xuemeng. "Xuemeng and I will share a room." Amo Ranyuan was originally smiling, but at this moment, he couldn't help but be stunned. He really hoped that Xuemeng would stay with Chu Wanning, and that he would stay with Shimei. But when Chu Wanning made this choice, he felt inexplicably stifled. He didn't know that he was like a little wild dog who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The little wild dog had met a man, and although that man wasn't very nice to him, he was still willing to give him some bones to chew on for 3 meals a day. But the little wild dog didn't like this fierce fellow, so although he gnawed on the bones every day, he licked his paws and barked at the man. He didn't treat this man as his master. But for some reason, one day, this man came out with a bowl, and what was inside was not the bones he was familiar with, but millet. A beautiful bird with bright fur fluttered down from the bowl, perched on the man's shoulder, and stared at him with its round eyes, its sparkling beak intimately rubbing against his face. The man also looked over, stroked the bird's luxurious wings, and carefully fed it grain. He couldn't help but be stunned at the sight of this wild dog. After all, he thought that Chu Wanning would choose him. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.